Hi everybody. So in this video, we're going to do some more examples of graphing using base graphs and transformations. Okay, so in the previous video, we talked about going step by step, and we also talked about the right order for doing the transformations. Okay, so we're going to look at this example here. Okay, 3 times the cube root of negative x plus 1. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is identify our base graph, and that would be cube root of x. Okay, and then we're going to identify our transformations. Okay, so remember our x transformations are coming from within the base graph, so within the cube root. Okay, so inside the cube root, the only thing we see is a minus sign. So this is going to be a reflection. Okay, and then for our y transformations, that's going to come from everything that's outside the cube root. So this 3, which is going to be a stretch times 3. Okay, just for the y coordinates. And then this plus 1 is going to move the graph up 1. Okay. All right, so we're going to order them. Again, I like to do my x transformations first, so I would do this one first. And then for the y transformations, it's very important that you do the stretch before you do the shift. Okay, so we'll do this one first, and then this one. Okay, so let's look at our graph. Okay, so first we are just going to look at our base graph, which is the cube root graph. Okay, so our cube root graph is going to look like this. Label it cube root of x. Okay, so we have this shape. Okay, so then our first step here, okay, what did we decide to do first? Oh, reflect, okay. So our first step, okay, is going to be to reflect the x coordinates. Okay, so that's going to be to reflect this way across the y-axis. Okay, it's important to know if it's an x transformation or a y transformation, right? Because that tells you if it's reflecting this way or up and down like that, right? Okay, so we're going to reflect across. This point is going to reflect across to here, okay? The center point is on the line of reflection, so it's going to stay the same. And the point that was here is going to reflect across over here, okay? All right, so you can see that our graph is reflected and now it's backwards. Okay, so let's do our second transformation. Okay, which we said was going to be stretching the y coordinates. Okay, so we're going to have y stretch times 2. Oops. Times 3. There we go. Okay, so we're going to take all of our y coordinates and we're going to multiply them by 3. Okay, so at this point here, my x coordinate is going to stay the same. My y coordinate is going to multiply by 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, here my x coordinate is going to stay the same and my y coordinate is going to get multiplied by 3. So 0 times 3 is 0. Okay, and then for my last key point, x coordinate stays the same, y gets multiplied by 3. So -1 times 3 is -3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so my graph is going to look like this. Okay, so you can see this one is really stretched out compared to that one. Okay, then let's look at our last transformation. Okay, that was move it up 1. Okay, so let's look at that. Okay, so I'm going to move all of my key points up 1. Okay, so my old key point was here. I'm going to move it up 1. My old key point was here. I'm going to move it up 1. Okay, my old key point was here. I'm going to move it up 1. Okay, and then I'm going to draw in the shape of my graph. Like that. Okay. So this is the graph. The final graph is the graph of the function that they're asking you about. Okay, so 3 times the cube root of negative x, okay, plus 1. Okay. All right. Let's look at our second example. Okay. So we're going to do some with the graphs that are the most confusing, which is the 1 over x and 1 over x squared graphs. Okay. So we're going to start off by listing our base graphs. I kind of gave it away, but this is the 1 over x graph. Okay, and then we're going to list our transformations. Okay, so the x transformations are going to be things that are inside the 1 over x. Okay, remember that you can always write this as 2 times 1 over x minus 1 plus 1. Okay, so this way to me it's a little bit clearer what's inside and what's outside. Okay, so what's inside right here is this minus 1. Okay, so this is going to move the graph right 1. Okay, and then the stuff that's outside is this multiply by 2, so we're going to have a stretch by 2. Okay, and this plus 1 is going to move it up 1. Okay, and now we're just going to decide what order to do them in. Okay, the only important thing is that you do the stretch before you do the shift, but I like to do my x transformations first and my y transformations second. Okay, so let's look at our graph. First we'll look at the base graph, which is going to be the 1 over x graph. Okay, so our key points are going to be here and here. Okay, and remember this graph has those key features, which are the vertical and horizontal line that give you the shape of the graph. Okay, the lines themselves are not visible in the graph, right? The only part you can see is this, but they are an important feature to draw so that you know the shape of the graph. Okay, so let's look at our first transformation. Okay, oops, hands over the whole thing. Okay, and our first transformation was, what was it? Oops. Right 1, okay? Okay, so we're going to take all of our stuff from our original graph and we're going to move it right 1. So I'm going to take my key point from here and move it right 1. I'm going to take my key point from here and move it right 1. Okay, and then I'm going to move my asymptotes. So if I shift, I mean those horizontal and vertical lines, right? So if I'm shifting a horizontal line and I shift it to the right, it's still going to be in the same place. Okay, so we're going to draw in as this dotted line. Okay, and then I'm going to take my vertical line that was here and I'm going to shift it to the right 1. So now it's here. Okay, and I'm going to draw it in by dotting it. Okay, now I'm going to draw in the shape of my graph. Okay. Remember the graph doesn't go across those lines, okay, but it does go towards them. So you can see it going towards the line, towards the line, towards it, and towards it, okay, but it doesn't ever go across those lines. Okay, let's look at our step 2. which was what? Stretch the y coordinates times 2. Okay. Okay, so we're going to stretch our y coordinates by 2. Okay, so we're going to look at this graph. Okay, so for my key point here, I'm going to have the same x coordinate, which was 2. Okay, and my y coordinate is going to get multiplied by 2. Okay, so my old y coordinate was 1. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing with my other key point, which was here at 0, -1. Okay, so x coordinate is still 0. Y coordinate get multiplied by 2, so -1 times 2 is -2. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for my lines. Now the vertical line, right, only the x coordinate is really shown, so it doesn't matter. Okay, but for my y coordinate, I would multiply it by 2. So here I would have 0 times 2 is 0, so it stays along the axis. Okay, and now I'm going to draw my graph. Okay, so remember to draw it going down towards those lines. Okay, so even though the key point is further away from them now, it should still go towards the lines. Okay, in particular, sometimes, and I've just done this, sometimes people don't show it crossing this line, which it definitely does. So make sure your graph is going all the way towards those dotted lines that you have. Okay. Then let's look at our last transformation, okay, which was up 1, okay. All right, so we're going to take everything from our previous graph and shift it up 1. Okay, so I'm going to take my key point that was here at 2, 2, okay, and I'm going to shift it up 1. I'm going to take my key point that was here at 0, -2 and shift it up 1. Okay, when I shift that vertical line, it doesn't really shift, right? Still looks the same. But when I take this horizontal line and shift it up 1, it's going to shift from 0 to 1. Okay, and now I'm going to draw in the shape of my graph, making sure that I show these graphs going towards the lines. Okay, and that would be my final graph. All right, let's look at an example of the 1 over x squared base graph. Oops, I forgot to put in my square here. Okay, so this is the 1 over x squared base graph, like I just said. Okay. Now our x transformations are going to be everything inside the 1 over x squared. So you can see what's inside of that is the +2, so this is going to move it right 2. Okay, now we're going to look at the y transformations, which are going to be outside of that. We can see this minus sign. Okay, so we're going to have a reflection. Okay, and then we have this -2, which is going to move it down 2. Okay, pick an order. I like to do my x stuff first. Okay, and then for the y transformations, it's important to do the reflection before you do the shift. Okay, so let's look at our graph here. Okay, so first we're going to look at our base graph, which is y equals 1 over x squared. Okay, so this has key points here and here. Okay, and just like the 1 over x graph, it has the key features of those lines that go along the axes that show you the shape of the graph. Okay, so this graph looks like this. Okay, so let's do our first transformation. Okay, so our first transformation was right 2. Okay. So we're going to take everything from our base graph and shift it right 2. So I'm going to take this key point and I'm going to shift it right 2. So 1, 2. Okay, I'm going to take this key point and shift it right 2, 1, 2. Okay. When you shift the horizontal line, it doesn't look any different. Okay, now when you shift the vertical line from here right 2, it goes 1, 2, and now it's here. Okay, and then I'm going to draw in my shape. Okay. All right. So now let's look at our second transformation, which was reflect the y coordinates. Okay. So we're going to reflect across the x-axis. Okay. So we're going to take all of our key features from here and we're going to reflect them. Okay. So I had this key point here. I'm going to reflect it down. I had this key point here. I'm going to reflect it down. Okay. This line is on the line of reflection, so it doesn't look any different. Okay. Now the vertical line, the top half will reflect down to the bottom, and the bottom half will reflect up to the top. Okay, so it looks the same, but it is reflected. Okay, and then we're going to draw in our shape. Oops. So you can see the shape is upside down, right? Like you would expect from a reflected graph. Okay, and now we're going to do our last transformation, which was down 2. Down 2? Yes. Okay. So we're going to take everything from our graph and we're going to move it down 2. Okay. So I'm going to take my key point that was here and I'm going to move it down 1, 2. Take my key point that was here, move it down 1, 2. Okay. Shifting a vertical line down doesn't make it look any different. Okay. And I'm going to take my horizontal line and move it down 1, 2. So now my horizontal line is here. Okay. And this gives me my final graph. Okay. All right. Let's look at one last example. Okay. So my base graph for this one is going to be y equals absolute value x. Okay. And I'm going to look at my x transformations first, which are the transformations that come from the inside of the absolute value. So I'll have this plus 3. Okay, so this is just going to move it right. Oh, I'm sorry. Left 3. Okay. Then I'm going to have my y transformations. Okay. So I have this negative sign. This is going to reflect. Okay. Then I have the 2 that's going to stretch. Okay. And then I have this minus 1 that's going to move it down 1. Okay. So now we need to pick an order. I like to do the x transformations first, so I'm going to do this one first. Okay. Now, when you're looking at the y transformations, okay, you need to reflect and stretch. Both of these need to go before the shift, okay? So you can do reflect and then stretch, or you could stretch and then reflect. It will not affect the look of the graph, okay? So you guys can see that here we have 4 different transformations, okay? So let's look at our graph. I guess I should just leave this here because we're going to look back at the transformations. Okay, so let's look at our base graph. Okay, y equals absolute value x. Okay, and our key points were here, here, and here, and we have this V-shaped graph. Okay. All right, so let's look at our first transformation, okay, which we said was left 3. Okay, so I'm going to take the graph that I have here. I'm going to move everything left 3. Oops, that's not a very flat line. Okay, so I'm going to take my key point from here, right, at -1, 1, and I'm going to move it left 3. 1, 2, 3. Take my vertex from the origin, move it left 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and take my third key point from here and move it left 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Then we're going to look at our second step, okay, which was reflect. Okay. So, okay, we're going to reflect the y coordinates, which is across the x-axis. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take our key points from here and we're going to reflect them. Okay, so I had a key point that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so I had a key point that was here. Okay, I'm going to reflect it down. I had a key point that was here. When you reflect it, it stays the same. Okay, and then I had a key point that was here. I'm going to reflect it down. Okay, and then draw my V-shaped graph. All right, let's look what our next step was. So we've done shift left, reflect across the x-axis. Now we're going to stretch the y coordinates times 2. Okay. So we're going to take all of our key points from this graph and we're going to multiply the y coordinates by 2. Okay, so here my y coordinate was -1. -1 times 2 is -2. Okay, here my y coordinate was 0. 0 times 2 is 0. And here my y coordinate was -1. -1 times 2 is -2. Okay, then I'm going to draw in my V shape. Okay, so after the reflection that you can see that it's upside down, and then after the stretch you can see that it's longer and skinnier, okay, and still upside down. All right, so let's see our last transformation, okay, which was down 1. Okay, so we're going to take everything from our previous graph and we're going to move it down 1. Okay, so we have this graph here. Okay, I'm going to take my key point that was here and I'm going to move it down 1. Okay, I'll take my key point that was here, move it down 1. Take my key point that was here, move it down 1. Okay, and then draw in the shape of my graph. Okay. All right. I hope you guys are methodical about doing the steps in the right order and just doing one step at a time. Once you've had a ton of practice, you won't need to do them all separately, but for now, I encourage you to try this method. I think it keeps you from jumbling the translations together. All right, and I will see you guys soon.